Good afternoon, everyone. It is July 4th. Happy Independence Day for you Americans out there. We've had a number of changes in the past 6 months, so we're done with the first half of the year, the second quarter, and of course the sixth month. Done with all of that, and we've had quite a change in the market. We started the year right around this 3,800 number, pretty much never got to breaking that right around the open. That's where we held back in March, and then we consolidated during this very boring April and May consolidation. Kind of a textbook breakout where we held the key support around that yearly open, we broke upwards, and then consolidated, and eventually got that breakout over this major swing high, this 4,300 number, which was kind of capping us since about April of 2022, and we got up above, and now we're trading not too far off the all-time high, whatever that would be. From there to there, only 6% off of the all-time high. So that number I have up there with above equals all-time high, that's just once we get above 90%, 95% of the volume done in 2022, and by that point we'll only be a couple hundred points shy. So I'd be surprised if we went and made a 1,000-point dipper to new lows on the year. So in general, the way I'll be looking at this market moving forward is using that 4,300 number as a pivot. Really, I don't want to see us getting below this 4,100s. I think we shouldn't really get into there. I think we'll eventually one day get back into 4,300s, maybe 4,220, something like that. But for now, I don't think we'll be getting below here for the rest of the year. That's just what I'm looking at as of now. Similar story on the Nasdaq. Very, very close to that all-time high. Not too far off it at all right now. What is that? 7.5%. A little bit weaker into the end of the quarter, not making new high of the year, unlike the ES. Been a little bit weak lately, but I think that's important to note. It might be showing weakness on these lower time frames intraday, but overall, it's carried a lot further off from those lows. What is that? A 45% move off the lows, having some pullbacks along the way, but really they've been minor, and that breakout being much nicer on the Nasdaq. That quick backfill off of these critical highs and then moving up higher. Another one right there and moving up higher. Perhaps another one right there and moving higher. We'll see. So that's just a little bit of the higher time frame outlooks. Now, how am I looking at this week? Let's get into it. I know these zones are chunky. We'll fix them up as they come into play. For now, let's look at it. Well, what do we have? We came into the week on Monday. We broke last week's lows, these key supports around 43.80s. We broke these lows, came down below, and then on Tuesday we were unable to stay below last week's low, squeezed upwards. Then all of Wednesday and Thursday, we kept holding this 4,400 area, then 4410s, and then overnight we got that huge squeeze and then continued this squeeze during the RTH, pretty much a linear drive up off that 4465. The gap at 4465 literally drove upwards, and then we just inched ourselves to making a new high of the year, right around 4,500, and that's what I was calling for all week long. I was saying, once we make that Wednesday low, we typically run another 100 points, and we ran 98 points, 98 and 3/4. So that's what I was looking for on the S&P. Now on the Nasdaq, a little bit of a different story, but mostly the same. Same idea. Monday we came in, broke last week's lows, and then came up above, squeezed above that last week's lows, and that's when I said I don't want to see that break. I want to see this hold once again. And then we kind of turned around, failed a bunch. We had a bit more trouble on the Nasdaq making new highs, but once we did, we were able to break out and above the prior week's high. Now, interestingly, unable to make new highs on the year, coming in about 100 points short. So the Nasdaq being a little bit weak day to day, but overall still plenty strong. Tomorrow we do have FOMC minutes. I'm not expecting too fast of a session. Thursday, that's when we start getting some good amount of news, and then Friday's the big one, NFP. So what I'm looking for in general is going to be a quieter, smaller week after a pretty decent range last week. That was what, 100 points, 150 points, 130 points, decent range. So I'm expecting a smaller week, only 3 trading days here, and FOMC minutes really will be slowing down the market before that 2 p.m. release. In terms of how I'm looking at this thing to trade, so not only will I be looking for it to be slow, but in the event that we stay above 44.43, so the prior week's RTH highs and also this sort of external trading hours highs around there. If we stay above there, we don't even get into the weekly point of control, the monthly point of control, the weekly VWAP close, all that sort of stuff right around 44.18 to 22, 19 to 22, sorry. If we do not get into those numbers, and instead we just rotate back up to the highs, I would be hesitant being short. I instead think we would start continuing up, and we'll figure out when we find a sell, but I think we just start driving on upwards. So I'll be aware of that. Ideally, we come in, backfill off that weekly point of control, the monthly point of control, the weekly VWAP close, all that sort of stuff, and then we start moving back above 44.55s, and longs should majorly be in play for us to break these highs and get into the 4,500 plus range. Now, I don't really want to see, bulls don't really want to see us getting back down to this 43.85 number. If we do, I think we end up with a liquidation scenario down to at least 55, but really, I think you start trading in this contract gap down to about 43.03. So that's how I'm looking at it. Ideally, we hold 44.22s. Same thing on the Nasdaq. I think you're in for a lot of chop here since it failed to make equal highs like the S&P did. Instead, it made this gross lower high scenario. I think you have this choppiness where bulls are trying to get it to break out, bears are trying to sit on it. Again, ideally, we come down into this 120 area. I think that is where we have our weekly VWAP closes and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, the weekly VWAP close, point of control, half back, all that sort of good crap around that 120 number. So ideally, we come into there where this demand was formed, get back over 220s, this critical resistance level, and then we can start breaking last week's highs, break these highs, and get into higher numbers. But if we do come down, same thing as the ES, if we do come down to where these prior weekly lows were, if we come into this 990-ish area, let's call it 15K for ease of reference, we come down to 15K, I think we'd very likely be looking at a liquidation scenario, breaking these lows, coming into this sort of demand zone around 14,800, if not lower, if not similarly getting into this sort of gap over here, getting into this 14,500 area, if not 14,280. So that's how I'm looking at it. Again, I don't think you would get all that sort of liquidation just this week, but I think that's how we'll be looking forward for this first month or two. Now, typically, the first week of the month is a bit of a smaller range, and you add into it that we only have 3 days, and one of them being the FOMC minutes day. I'll be looking for a tighter week in general. Friday, we may be able to get some movement off that NFP, but tighter week in general. Maybe we start getting some expansion next week. Hope that makes sense. Hope that helps. Have a great week. Trade safe.